We're going to look at 3 different replays of 3 different mmrs of people playing Rubick. This first one is Hurl 2, then we'll be looking at a Legend player, and finally an Immortal. So straight away Rubick here goes for the rune. He never leveled up telekinesis to maybe even try and take the rune there, but he ends up achieving pretty much nothing and is now on an escape mission against 3 heroes. He gets hit by one shrapnel, he dodges the second one, gets hit by the third, and pretty much is kind of dead anyway. It's like the pretty stupid positioning there, and having still no skilled at 30 seconds is probably not the best way to go on any interaction for the runes. So here we have the first harass that Rubick is doing in lane, and as you see he just does some basic right clicks. However, one thing that he's not utilizing is Fade Bolt and using that before you start trading attacks. And he doesn't really do it at any point during the laning stage, and it's definitely something that people are lacking in knowledge, that when you use Fade Bolt that you can reduce the enemy's physical damage and trade right clicks with them very heavily in your favor. So over the past 2 minutes or so he's failed several pulls in a row, and now he ends up pulling successfully, but it's probably not the best timing to be pulling at, because now the bounty runes are spawning. When your creep wave is pushed in like this, Faceless Void cannot really compete in the lane, and it automatically allows the enemy to just safely go and take the bounty runes without even Rubick being able to contest it. Or even if some fight breaks out, kind of where Rubick is standing right now, seeing this spot, that Faceless Void could move down, but he can't if the creep wave is pushing under his tower. So now it's 9 minutes into the game. Sniper is top for some reason. He's the enemy mid hero, and Faceless Void has hit level 6. And coming up is an amazing chrono here. He gets stunned in the chrono, and Rubick is following up and getting that Fade Bolt out onto Sniper makes it pretty hard for Sniper to trade back on him. But Faceless Void time walks into the power shot. Oh no, 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 no. There's nothing. Imagine trying to support this guy. I feel sorry for this Rubick. So as you can see here at 10 minutes, Rubick is level 5, and he takes a long time to get to level 6. Someone else took the Tome of Knowledge, and now he decides to stand back further. This is not really what you want to do when you're playing position 5 and you have a really good ultimate, because the Faceless Void doesn't really get a huge amount stronger by getting level 7, and Rubick standing back like this, it's probably more valuable for him to his level 6. But as you'll see this, he doesn't really do anything to stay in experience range of creeps, and even a little bit after this you'll end up seeing that there's not much happening. Medusa comes for some pretty much a weird gank here and nothing really happening, and Rubick is still not gaining experience for any of this time, and this is fast forwarded, so like still he's not even in the experience range of creeps. Even if he was jungling it would be more impactful, and because mid lane is left open, this is typically what happens in a lot of matches a little bit higher up, where when the mid laner goes into the jungle or starts ganking somewhere, a support will come mid to get their level 6 or to get some crucial level or even some gold. So Rubick's team is after losing a fight there, the Medusa is after dying, and it's not really a time that you want to fight. The Ogre Magi is teleporting in, and Rubick uses his lift at the start. He has Wanding Rift and he never ended up using it. He actually got stunned by the shackle shot here. And then Rubick decides to keep committing in his position and Wanding Rifts the Sniper. And typically this is a pretty bad position. Even if you hit the Wanding Rift, these 3 heroes here, Wind Ranger, Sniper, and Wraith King, are mostly physical damage with right clicks. So it's not going to do that much if you silence them. And also Wraith King is one of those heroes that you don't want to get on top of. When you use your telekinesis early in the fight as well, that pretty much prevents you from having any defensive capability in the fight unless you have a spell stolen that allows you to escape. So now he has Wind Run, and he's after cutting the creep wave here while his team are pressuring bottom and pretty much going to push this tower probably. There's also a Sniper. As you can see in the mini-map right now, Sniper is moving down here and he's after walking through a ward and invisible. Oh, he got out, the smart boy. No one can see him. Anyway, the Sniper gets out here, even though he was the only one in behind his tower. So Rubick's play never ended up pulling out to anything. Preferably what you would have done is that around this point when you bring the creeps in here, is that's when you start diving under the tower. The creeps are pushing in here, and this is where Kunkka and Rubick should really just be pushing in on the Sniper, but they don't have any dust. This is a really early Shadow Blade with no stats. It's just good old Blightstone. Can't get any better than a few mangoes to use your Shadow Blade. Oh, I love pearled bills. So Rubick has started placing some observer wards. He's been pretty weak on his vision game. He doesn't really do anything with dewarding or placing down his own vision, but he does here start the fight with a nice lift onto Earthshaker. This prevents an Echo Slam going in on his teammates, who are really the big damage dealer. Now he does use his spell steal a little bit early, which he uses to pretty much put down a Fissure, and ideally you want to wait maybe a little bit longer to get the Echo Slam. But as you'll end up seeing here, it doesn't really turn out to be much worse, because regardless of whether he stole Echo Slam or not, the fight still plays out really good for them. They still get those 3 kills, and they even managed to catch Sniper here and also the Raid King. So pretty much a full team wipe just by being together with his team, and that lift at the start of the fight was pretty much the biggest, most crucial thing that he did in that fight. So they end up catching Sniper here to an Observer and Sentry that Rubick put down, and enemy supports are not placing observer wards, so Sniper is coming out of base just to go and place down an observer ward, which is pretty good. Like, that's something small, like it's probably a little bit better than what the other players are doing, the enemy team. One thing though is that when Raid King kind of comes out a little bit, like they don't have a lot of damage to really kill Rubick, so he could be playing a little bit more aggressive position, and Ogre Magi ends up tanking the damage from Raid King, whereas Rubick could kind of be baiting with the win run, and instead he's going in now, and Echo Sam ends up missing Rubick, and he just ends up being able to lift him now, which is pretty straightforward, and they're just able to kill him, and he lifts him kind of into the creeps, but it doesn't matter, like he's lifting him down onto the low ground. That was a pretty nice reposition, I must say, and even the Earthshaker can't really do much off of that. So now at this point they're kind of just like getting out, and the Chronosphere hasn't been used, so they decide to turn around, and Rubick uses his Fade Bolt. And really throughout all of this is to emphasize that Rubick is just playing with his team. This is something that is not that commonly done at Herald enough, and it's something that players are lacking at most of the time. So he's ended up picking up Telescope here on Rubick, which is a pretty good choice that he's carrying this. Gives him extra cast range. A lot of people end up buying Aether Lens, so you get even better range for everything. As you can see, there's a massive range now on his lift, so it's up to him now to utilize this extra cast range and have an even better position where it's harder for the enemy to go on him. One thing that is lacking with this high ground push here is the detection for Sniper. We do only have a Sentry down, but you typically want to get Dust when people have Shadow Blade, and when someone like Sniper stands at the back of the fight, he might not always stand into that Sentry. Now these fights are going on pretty well. Rubick is in a pretty good position here, but the Faceless Void goes down. Medusa is not here, which is kind of the characteristics of what you see a lot in Herald, and that's not what you want to happen. Medusa just has to stand there, auto attack, and she wins. Like this, she didn't have to do anything. Now Rubick's team is after getting picked off one by one, and he tried to help a little bit, but he couldn't really do anything about it. He ends up getting focused down here by Raid King and ends up dying. Yeah, he does have buyback. Now, you will notice that his build is kind of weird, that he has Refresher Orb. He hasn't utilized the active of the Refresher Orb. He hasn't stolen Ultimate yet. And it's kind of questionable why you would end up wanting to build this item. Now, what is essential about this right now is that when the enemy starts pushing for a building, you end up seeing what you typically want to do is stand from a distance and maybe use your Fade Bolt, especially when you have the Telescope for extra cast range plus the Aether Lens. It is something that you can sometimes risk. Now he ends up instead deciding to use Raidfire Blast onto the Raid King, and that's not necessarily the most best idea, and reducing his physical damage with Fade Bolt would have been most preferable here, and he does end up going down to Mjolnir procs. Now Rubick doesn't really spend much time farming, and 40 minutes into the game is when the next tier of Neutralize from the start, so Rubick starts to do some jungling to get those items. And what it might end up seeming pretty good, his positioning is so bad that no one on his team is near him. And this is really not where you want to be at any point at 40 minutes into the game, is being on your own as a support. Because you never know what's really going to come. And you end up seeing that the enemy can just push straight off of this. As we see, they just go tier 4s and end up winning the game. They have to take a fight with 3 heroes against 5, and they end up losing. Guess who wins? And it's kind of like an anticlimactic ending. No, there is it! Oh, yes, the plays! The comeback. No, the blade mail! The time walk. Let's go! Ah! Oh, there's still a chance. Rubick is back. Where is he? Is he AFK? What is he doing? No! Rubick, what are you doing? He doesn't know that he's alive! No! No! What the fuck? No! No! So now after that like Pepega game, we're on to the Legend 1 Rubick, and this time he's actually decided to skill up an ability before he goes for runes. Now he has had pretty bad position here and ends up causing him to take quite a significant amount of damage. He's at 50% health before even the rune fight starts, and this is not the most preferable way to be in any fight. You see Raking isn't committing for this rune, and Rubick is pretty bad to react to what his teammates are doing, and he ends up going down here for first blood. That is really not a way that you want to start the game on really any hero. So Rubick does a pull here at 1 minute and 50 seconds. We have Lina who contests it, and this Lina really likes contesting the creep waves. Now, regardless of whether the pull succeeded or not, you'll end up seeing that Rubick does end up taking advantage of the current equilibrium of the creep wave. When Legion comes in and attacks him, she ends up taking the aggro of the tower, even though that attack didn't fully end up hitting. And Legion actually takes a huge amount of damage here. It's like 70-80% of her health. And even the Lina is taking damage as well. So that was a massively favorable trade. So one thing that's questionable about Rubick's like early game items here is the fact that he's kind of rushing for a bracer. In this type of lane against Lina, she ends up harassing a lot, especially once she hits level 3 to 5. She can do a huge amount of damage in lane. And even Rubick goes down because of the lack of health regen that he has in lane. He ends up kind of admitting to his mistake here. He ends up buying a ring of protection, and I think he sells it and ends up buying more regen like a salve and tangos. This is something that he should have been buying much earlier, and these stat items are not really that useful. And if you really do want stats, you probably should be better off buying those iron branches, which can build into a magic wand later. So Raking ends up going down because Rubick is kind of standing near the bounty rune, and Raking didn't realize that Rubick wasn't there. Rubick does end up lifting Lina. He attempted to drop her on the cliff and ends up getting 2 bounty runes. So it works out kind of okay. The carry probably shouldn't have been making those mistakes. Maybe Rubick could have spent a little bit less time going for the runes. However, one thing you will notice here is that every time that Rubick goes for a pull, that Lina is trying to contest it. And the reason why is because Lina has an observer ward. It's kind of predictable for higher skilled players to know that this observer ward exists when the position 4 is always contesting it. You can see this observer ward here. It ends up seen when Rubick goes to pull these creeps. So now you see here's another attempt at a pull. Doesn't end up succeeding because Lina contests it. That's again another sign that there's going to be an observer ward somewhere there. It's too obvious when it happens multiple times on the laning stage. But by now that observer ward might end up just being dead. So it's a little bit too late to realize if Rubick wanted to deward it. So he ends up going in for a kill here using the haste rune. He probably ended up communicating to his teammates that he was going to go for this dive here. Ends up working out really well here. Now, because he's not really achieving much on bottom, the Raking has decided to go into the jungle. The Rubick comes top, and he's planning on pulling this big camp that was stacked by someone else. And a really nice play that denies golden experience from this top lane. Now, right now it doesn't matter that his mana is being burnt by anti-mage because he already had literally 0 mana. And he ended up picking up a nice kill. Very good rotation here. So we have Rubick standing in the trees here. He ends up putting down an observer ward, and you can see Legion Commander farming in the lane. Now he ends up staying in the trees for a longer time, trying to find someone who he can steal a spell off of. However, he's vastly overcommitted his position at this point, and Legion can very easily just come in behind. And also Lina has a pretty good chance, just Lina on her own, to kill the Rubick. So you want to be kind of careful how you're engaging onto a hero like that. So coming up to a fight now, and Rubick is positioned right beside Tiny and Nightstalker, ready to be positioned behind him. He doesn't have a blink dagger, so this is actually a pretty decent positioning. He does get an ice pad off from the almost like the shadows, or where TA didn't really react. And this does end up resulting in Nightstalker being able to get in, get some damage. And we have another ice pad ready to go again. He ends up hitting it a second time. So that's a really nice utilization of the spell that he ended up stealing. It was a pretty high impact here and a good way to start a fight also. And it ends up resulting in 3 kills. So they're after going for a smoke gank here at 26 minutes in. It is nighttime also. So Nightstalker really does want to go for a fight around this time. They find Lina. He doesn't really start with his lift at the start. He waits a little bit and he spell steals. He gets an ice pack yet again here, and Templar Assassin is chasing after him. Now he does have dust, but instead of using the dust, he ends up walking around right into the meld range of Templar Assassin. Takes a lot of unnecessary damage here, and almost even died if the TA was a little bit better. But here's a really nice ice pad, which Anti-Mage, you'd think he'd blink away, but he ends up blinking into the ice pan, walking into a little bit, which ends up resulting into a chain stun, where Anti-Mage can't do anything. So again, he's probably should be even a Jakiro player, you know, maybe that's what he's hero that he's good at. So you are seeing that he is using these spells pretty decently. So they end up going for a smoke gank here. They see Lina in the river, but they probably want a better target than this, like Templar Assassin here. Now, Templar Assassin blinks away, just going for some farm. And that ends up them just going on to Lina instead when their smoke broke. The Blink Dagger on Legion is cancelled. And TA actually just goes down here. Her Aegis is expired here now. And she ends up using BKB. So at this point, Rubick can't really do much. And he has to kind of just try and survive. And he ends up getting gone on by Anti-Mage. And ends up dying. He probably should have realized that like players have BKBs and he needs to position himself differently once there's that mass magic immunity. And you are kind of coming to the kind of later part of the game at this point, and the buyback was kind of unnecessary as well. So now they're going high ground and the enemy isn't really responding to this very well. Everyone's kind of scared to initiate. We have Lina going in first here, and Rubick ends up kind of like interrupting Lina from being able to do a lot of her physical damage. And now when Templar Assassin goes in with the Legion, the Rubick backs off. Now Rubick could have got bursted down if the enemy coordinated a little bit better. The Templar Assassin never pressed her BKB, for example. But what you will notice is that he could have had a Glimmer Cape at this point just before this fight if he didn't end up spending the gold on a buyback. That's what might have allowed him just to escape there when Anti-Mage blinks on top of him. Razor's after dying and Ray King's trying to escape here. And Rubick shows up to the fight a little bit late. He steals Ice Pat yet again and throws it down into the middle of the fight. Now one spell that you might think about trying to take as well is Blink from Anti-Mage. He hasn't really tried to get that yet. Now Templar Assassin respawns, and before she can press BKB, he gets the Ice Pad off onto the Templar Assassin when she respawns. Now he backs off from the fight using his Glimmer Cape, but the enemy still have vision of him. So the path that he took after using the Glimmer Cape was not the most preferable one. He tried to stay closer to his teammates, yet this ends up kind of working out anyways. Like one small thing that he could have done a bit better on top of like the positioning was just click your dust before you die when there's an invisible hero on the enemy team. So over the next 90 seconds or so, a lot of heroes end up just getting picked off one by one. And very little has to do with Rubick, and it's mostly just the fact that the matches allowed his team to get strong enough and that they've won enough fights earlier on in the game, and it's accumulated to this. So this is pretty much a common thing that happens in Legend, where you don't have one massive team fight that wins the game, and it's usually one team has been building a lead up over time, and they eventually just try and take advantage of that lead. So now we're looking at a ranked 930 Rubick, and straight away he puts down an Observer Ward across the river, and he ends up going really aggressive position here, trying to go and take the shrine, I think, or wrap around the enemy. So even though he has something similar positioning what the Legend player was doing at the bounty runes, this time the Rubick has Boots of Speed, and he's also positioned for Rubick. I know a lot of people are playing him as mid at high ranks or whatever, but generally playing him as a support, it tends to be a lot better playing it in position 4 than in position 5. Now straight after Rune spawned, he actually ended up taking the outpost, and he's going straight for a creep pull here, and he ends up pulling the creeps all the way around here, up the stairs, making sure he keeps the aggro, and pulls it between his tier 1 and tier 2. This makes it a lot easier for Sand King to farm, and as you see, Ogre has decided to take some tower hits just for some fun. And Rubick is chasing down the Ogre. He doesn't get juked, and he almost catches the Ogre here, and Ogre ends up just about getting away. So pretty nice even not to like lose him through the trees there, but the pulling kind of gives favor to this lane because Sand King doesn't want all his mana burned so early on. I guess the pulling strat, or like pulling the creeps like that, ends up working out, and it's pretty hard to contest as well. So now 6 minutes in, he's just left his offlaner. That's a very typical around 5 to 7 minute mark that the position 4 hero will leave his lane and go rotation often to the safe lane and looking for a kill. Now this is where Rubick can come in, and he doesn't end up wasting his lift. He ends up instead saving it for the next target, which is Skyrat, and this ends up stalling enough time so that he can even get a body block in here and maybe even allow Ray King to get his stun off a second time. So Rubick makes his way back down bottom, and Sand King starts cutting the creep wave. Sand King's getting ready for a kill, and we have a really nice teleport here from the Disruptor to come to the shrine, which Rubick had taken earlier. Now they start off just attacking Anti-Mage, and he's also taking damage from the trees. However, one mistake that the Rubick kind of did there is the Fade Bolt bounced back on him and also the Disruptor from the Anti-Mage's counter spell. Now Anti-Mage does get caught here by a really pretty straightforward glimpse, and Rubick can just finish off and do some damage in on top of that. So pretty good coordination, and that is something that's very like iconically different from somewhere like, let's say, Ancient or Legend in comparison to what you see in Immortal, is that kind of coordination. So now Rubick is hit level 6, he just got his Tome of Knowledge, and straight away he goes and steals Morphline's stat switch thing. And when you end up switching to a certain type of stat, you actually keep that for pretty much the rest of the game until you steal it again and change something else. So you end up seeing he has 1200 health here. He ends up going and switching a little bit more, and ends up trying to go to Anti-Mage and steal his Blink Dagger. So he ends up getting the extra HP here, and he also gets Blink, a free Blink Dagger. And we see the Legend player never stole Blink once. He always tried to get Ice Patch, and that was all he cared about. Whereas a really early Blink plus like a stun is insane. Like, this is ideally what you want on any hero, and Rubick has this immediately. He can just blink in and initiate and jump from anywhere. Even though the Disruptor is there and the Templar Assassin is there to follow up damage, this is the kind of stuff that you really want, getting these sort of mobility spells. Now he's hiding in the trees here, but there's a lot of heroes nearby and there is a fight going on. So he has decided to teleport to the tier 1 tower. He does a waveform in on Morphline, tries to lift him back. It doesn't really turn into anything. It didn't burst him down accurately enough, but he is keep chasing here with the waveform. And the waveform does use up a decent amount of mana, but he does have arcane boots, and he's also flying out clarities to himself, so he can sustain this pretty easily. Now Rubick and Disruptor are looking at Anti-Mage, preparing to just go in on him, and Anti-Mage does blink away, and they're just seeing if they can catch him, maybe cancel a teleport. So they are trying to pressure this guy pretty hard and not give him an easy time to farm in a lane. So Rubick is here just coming with his team. They're able to kind of 5-man, and the enemy team has a pretty hard time being able to group together and fight right now, and they've identified this. Because if you look at Anti-Mage and Morphline, they really want to split push and farm and get like good items for later parts, and they don't peak around this time. So they can go and play really aggressive, find any sort of kills, and they're just running as a team because like once they find someone, they can pretty much like pick them off pretty straightforward. It's not necessarily much skill, but just good teamwork. So now they're pushing high ground here. You end up seeing that Rubick, every time he uses a spell, he always stays at roughly the maximum range. But when he's going to use a spell, he's always standing a little bit outside of the range, and he walks inwards. His passing brings him close enough to be able to use something like his Fade Bolt. And the Fade Bolt has a longer cast range than Telekinesis. So typically that's a good way of getting damage into a fight and constantly reducing the damage of the enemy. And this works really well in couple with like an early push where the enemy are lacking damage to kill the dire side in this case. So Rubick is kind of in a weird position, but it doesn't really matter that much because his team are like doing ridiculously well at this point, and he is getting a lot of follow-up damage, and he's just like spamming out his spells pretty much all fight. And this is ideally as any support of what you want to be doing in fights. Now he does go down, but it's pretty minuscule to what's really happening with the outcome of the game for Rubick to die there. So the enemy is constantly trying to split push, and they really want to finish the game now because Anti-Mage is going to get a lot stronger, and they've smoked behind as well here with the supports. Now they do get a glimpse here onto Earthshaker and a lift, and it ends up being able to burst down Earthshaker pretty easily. Also Templar Assassin goes down with her Aegis. Now they keep pushing here, and Earthshaker still has his Echo Slam, and Rubick commits into a little bit further of a position here. He ends up stealing Fissure and ends up trying to just block the path of these two guys so that they're kind of dividing the team fight. It works out pretty decently here, but Rubick does end up also getting caught along with like the other heroes, and they pretty much hard committed for this push, which is not necessarily the most preferable way that you want to push for objectives. So after that hard commit push from the last clip, we end up going on literally another 10 minutes of them failing to finish out the game, and up till now he has Anti-Mage's blink most of the time. He ends up blinking in here, lifting the Morphline. This does enable them to put their stuns together so that they can catch and burst down the Morphline, and this does help them finally end up finishing the game. Now if you want to see more Dota content like this, make sure you subscribe. If you want to see me play some matches, go follow me over on Twitch.